Vulcan Utility Signs presents Pipeline Marker Regulations for Safety, Compliance, and Damage Prevention. Vulcan Utility Signs is located in Foley, Alabama, and has provided the utility industry with innovative, high-performance marking solutions for over 35 years. Committed to quality and customer service, Vulcan stands ready to manufacture custom marking products in accordance with the latest industry standards and regulations. As you probably know, pipeline markers, also known as line markers, are required to mark underground utility lines. What you might not know is that the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, PHMSA, outlines very specific regulations regarding the placement of line markers, as well as the message that is displayed on the marker. This video has been created to provide basic knowledge of the federal laws and recommended best practices governing placement and design of line markers. The goal is that through education, pipelines will be properly marked, ensuring safety, compliance, and damage prevention of costly assets. In today's industry, line markers come in a variety of shapes, sizes, and designs. However, they must all follow one of two rules outlined in the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR, regarding line markers. CFR 192.707 regulates gas pipelines, and CFR 195.410 regulates liquid pipelines. Looking at this standard circle sign, there are some elements of the design that are required by law and others that are optional. First, notice the colors. The black and red are on a yellow background, which create a sharp contrast, making the message on the line marker easier to read. Both CFR regulations state that the line markers must have a background of sharply contrasting color. The no-dig symbol and the 811 call before you dig logo are generally used separately and are optional. However, having one or the other as a visual helps further reinforce the message. The word warning, caution, or danger, followed by the words petroleum, gas, or the name of the hazardous liquid or gas transported, pipeline, must be in letters at least 1 inch high with a stroke of 1/4 inch. The name of the operator and a telephone number, including area code where the operator can be reached at all times, is also a CFR requirement. Notice statements are optional. This regulation is from the U.S. DOT Pipeline Safety Regulations CFR 49, Section 190.229, Criminal Penalties. This federal law makes destruction or removal of these signs punishable with fines as high as $5,000 and imprisonment of up to 1 year. Regardless of the type line markers your company utilizes, be certain they comprise all of the elements reviewed to ensure compliance with CFR 192.707 or CFR 195.410. Compliance will increase public awareness and prevent damage of the buried utility. Do you often wonder how many line markers are required to properly mark a line? Unfortunately, there is not a simple answer to this complex question. Ultimately, it depends on a number of factors. CFR 192.707 states that for buried pipelines, a line marker must be placed and maintained as close as practical over each buried main and transmission line, at each crossing of a public road and railroad, and wherever necessary to identify the location of the transmission line or main to reduce the possibility of damage or interference. For pipelines above ground, line markers must be placed and maintained along each section of a main and transmission line that is located above ground in an area accessible to the public. CFR 195.410 states that each operator shall place and maintain line markers over each buried pipeline in accordance with the following. Markers must be located at each public road crossing, at each railroad crossing, and in sufficient number along the remainder of each buried line so that its location is accurately known. Each operator shall provide line marking at locations where the line is above ground in areas that are accessible to the public. A review of the recommended best practices is next. API RP 1109 from the Marking Liquid Petroleum Pipeline Facilities Section 2.1.2 recommends installing line markers or signs at each side of public roads, railroad crossing fence lines, property lines, right-of-way boundaries, water crossings, above-ground crossings, and other critical locations accessible to the public. Consideration should also be given to installing intermediate line markers or signs in high activity areas such that at least 2 markers are visible from any location along the pipeline where possible. API RP 1109 Section 2.3.4 states that caution should be used when installing a line marker anywhere other than directly over or in proximity to the buried pipeline to avoid possible misinterpretation as to where the actual pipeline is located. Remember, when it comes to marking right-of-way, there are federally mandated laws such as CFR 192.707 and CFR 195.410 and recommended practices such as API's RP 1109 that can help determine where line markers need to be located along the pipeline. There is also a general guideline known as line of sight. Line of sight is a term that refers to being able to stand at one marker and see the next one in the line. Though this practice is not an exact science, it can help provide guidance in most marking situations. A general rule of thumb is that the line markers should clearly mark the path that the buried line takes. Do you see the next line marker? The next line marker is not visible. In this photo, the line marker clearly marks the turn in the pipe. At each side of this road crossing, the pipeline running underground is clearly marked. At this railroad crossing, one can easily tell the path that the pipeline takes due to correct markings. When trees, hills, buildings, or other physical structures impede your ability to see the next marker, more markers must be added in between to clearly mark the path of the pipeline. For instance, on the flat plains of Texas, you may be able to use less markers to mark a straight buried line compared to a straight pipeline in mountainous Wyoming. However, if either pipeline is comprised of twists and turns, then more line markers will be needed to clearly illustrate its path. It is important to remember that each pipeline is different and will require a different marking solution. Be thorough when marking buried lines to protect costly assets and reduce the risk of fines. One final word of advice. Mark according to CFR, API, and line of sight recommendations. Common sense goes a long way as well. Follow the regulations and tips demonstrated in this video, and your line should be marked in compliance with current industry safety standards. When in doubt, it is always better to overmark your lines to provide the best damage prevention possible.